In February 1959, a single tent was found on a snow-covered slope in the Ural Mountains. The tent had been cut open from the inside. The boots, the coats, the food, everything was still there. But the 9 hikers had fled barefoot into the minus 30 degrees Celsius darkness. All 9 were found dead, and the Soviet government kept this case sealed for over 60 years. Watch to the end, and you'll know exactly what is fact and what was never explained. On January 23, 1959, 10 young people set out into the Ural Mountains. Most of them were students and graduates of the Ural Polytechnical Institute. Their leader was 23-year-old Igor Dyatlov, an experienced mountaineer. Their goal was a winter ski expedition to Mount Otorten in the northern Urals. Every one of them was a proven hiker, skilled in extreme cold. On January 28th, one member dropped out due to knee pain. His name was Yuri Yudin. He said goodbye to his friends and turned back alone. That decision saved his life. The remaining 9 pressed on into the mountains as planned. Before leaving, Dyatlov had made a promise that he would send a telegram to the hiking club the moment they returned. But that telegram never came. When the promised date passed in silence, a search party was assembled in late February. On February 26, 1959, the searchers found the tent. It stood on the slope of Kholat Syakhl, a name that means dead mountain. The tent was half buried in snow and empty, and one wall of the tent had been torn open from the inside out. Later forensic analysis confirmed the cuts were made from within. In other words, this was not the work of an intruder breaking in. The people inside had slashed their way out and fled on their own. But here is where it gets stranger. They had left with almost no coats and no proper boots. Clear footprints were preserved in the snow. Some prints were made in socks, some with a single shoe, some barefoot. And those footprints did not show signs of a panicked run. They led down toward the forest at a steady, even walking pace. On a minus 30 degrees Celsius night, nearly undressed, they had walked away from their warm tent. What could make 9 experienced mountaineers do such a thing? Following the footprints about 1.5 kilometers down, the searchers reached a large cedar tree. Beneath it, the first 2 bodies were found. Yuri Doroshenko and Yuri Krivonishenko, dressed only in their underwear. Near them were the remains of a small fire they had tried to build. Branches of the cedar were broken off as high as 5 meters up, as if someone had desperately climbed it to look for something. Between the tent and the tree, 3 more bodies were found. They were Dyatlov, Zinaida Kolmogorova, and Rustem Slobodin. All 3 were facing back toward the tent. It seemed they had collapsed in the cold while trying to return. All 5 of these hikers had died of hypothermia. Up to this point, it was a tragic but explainable mountaineering accident. But the remaining 4 were nowhere to be found. They were not discovered until May, 2 months later. As the snow melted, they emerged from beneath about 4 meters of snow in a forest ravine. And these 4 bodies changed everything. Nikolai Thibaut Brignol had a severe skull fracture. Semyon Zolotaryov and Ludmila Dubinina had crushed rib cages. Dubinina's ribs were broken in multiple places on both sides. But there was something deeply strange about it. Despite such injuries, there were almost no external wounds on their bodies. The medical examiner, Boris Vozrojdeny, described the force this way: a pressure comparable to being struck by a speeding car. It was not a force a human hand could produce. And the most shocking part remained. Dubinina was missing her tongue, both eyes, and part of her lips. Zolotaryov, too, was missing his eyes. This single detail would fuel decades of rumor, and here another clue appears. Some of the clothing tested positive for higher than normal radiation. In the Cold War era, people suspected secret weapons testing. In fact, the nearby Kyshtym nuclear disaster had occurred in 1957, and some of the victims had worked at nuclear facilities. On top of this, other hikers in the area gave testimony that they had seen glowing orange spheres in the night sky. Even the lead investigator, Lev Ivanov, recorded these reports. Decades later, he said he had been ordered by superiors to remove them from the official record. In 1959, the Soviets closed the case with a single phrase: death by a compelling natural force. The files were classified, and the area was sealed off for 3 years. It was a conclusion that explained nothing. So what does today's science actually say? In 2019, Russian authorities reopened the case. In 2020, the Prosecutor General's office announced an official cause: a slab avalanche. In 2021, 2 Swiss scientists modeled it in detail. Johann Gohm and Alexander Puzrin, experts in avalanche and geotechnical engineering. Their study was published in the journal Communications Earth and Environment. The explanation goes like this. The hikers cut into the slope to shield their tent from the wind. Strong katabatic winds then piled more snow above them. Hours later, a dense slab of snow broke loose. This small slab struck the tent. Not large enough to bury them, but enough to crush the chest and skull of someone lying down. This explains the fractures without external wounds. Carrying the injured, they left the tent in the dark and headed for the trees. And one by one, they succumbed to hypothermia. In the final stages of hypothermia, there is a phenomenon called paradoxical undressing. The dying person feels burning hot and strips off their clothing. This is why some of the bodies were found nearly undressed. The missing tongue and eyes were not supernatural either. The bodies lay buried for over 2 months in a wet, flowing ravine. Soft tissue is the first to be lost to decomposition and small scavengers. The radiation, too, is explained by some hikers' nuclear work and contamination of the era. One by one, the strangest clues found their place. No conspiracy, no aliens, no monster. Only an indifferent nature and the brutal winter of 1959. Yet even the scientists admit something, that this is the most plausible account, not proof of every moment of that night. Exactly what released that small slab and what they felt at the end, we may never know. Perhaps the reason this case has endured for 60 years lies in that very blank space. Even now, with nearly all the facts in hand, we still imagine that final night. Do you think this explanation truly closes the case? Share your thoughts in the comments.